Hi everyone, my name is Abby Woods, and I'm going to be talking to you today about A Star is Born in regards to the 4 waves of feminism. So for those of you who haven't seen A Star is Born, there's one original, 1937, and there are 3 remakes after the fact. There's one in 1954, there's one in 1976, and then finally in 2018, just last year. It's a interesting film in considering the 4 waves of feminism, because for those of you that haven't seen the film, there are differences between each version, but there's a woman, and we'll call her Esther. She wants to become an actor or a singer in some of the versions, and she leaves a small town. She moves to LA and wants to be in Hollywood. There she meets, we'll call him Norman. He is a star in the decline. He's an actor or a singer, depending on the version, and he is just starting he's kind of peaked already, so to speak. But he sees and meets Esther, sees that she has lots of talent, that she's beautiful, and he decides to help her out and kind of helps her find her way in the business. They fall in love and they get married, and the Norman character, as his career declines, he starts to feel less like a man, and he ends up committing suicide in each of the versions. The 2018 version is a little different, and we'll talk about that later, in that there's just a difference in the reason for suicide, and we'll get into that later. So for the purposes today, I'm going to be talking and focusing mostly on the 1954 version and the 2018 version. They're the most polar opposites. And so in the 1954 version, we're kind of in between the first and second waves of feminism. We have the first wave, which started with the suffragettes fighting for the right to vote, with the passing of the 19th Amendment. That kind of ends that era. Well, that era ends with the passing of the 19th Amendment in 1920. And the second wave of feminism doesn't start up until the mid-1960s. So 1954, when this version of The Star is Born comes out, we're kind of not really in any feminist wave at all. We're about to start the second wave, and we're on that uptake. So it's an interesting film to analyze in regards to feminism, because out of all 4 of these films, this one is the least feminist, which makes sense when it's not really in the middle of any wave. It's not really a focus. Granted, I have to admit that I'm a modern audience watching this film, especially when I have the benefit of comparing something like the 2018 version, one that's going to be a lot more politically aware. There's a certain amount of understanding and I almost want to say forgiveness in watching a 1950s version. We have to kind of try to get into the mindset of the society at the time. So that's what I'm going to do right now. There are interesting parts of the film. We'll play a clip right now, and it's going to show Norman trying to give Esther some advice. We're going to compare this clip back to back with the 2018 version of a clip that's a little bit similar, and we can talk about the differences after we watch them. So, first, the 1950s.
What makes you so sure about me?
I heard you sing.
Yeah, but
I know, just my word. But you know yourself, don't you? You just needed somebody to tell you.
I'm certainly mixed up now. I thought I was doing just fine.
You don't look so miserable. You don't have to make up your mind now. Sleep on it. I'll call you first thing in the morning.
Sleep on it. You fixed me for sleep, all right.
Whether you do it or not, don't ever forget how good you are. Hang on to that. Because I'm right.
All you got is you and what you want to say to people, and they are listening right now, and they're not going to be listening forever, trust me. So you got to grab it, and you don't apologize. You don't worry about why they're listening or how long they're going to be listening for. You just tell them what you want to say. 'cause how you say it is the stuff of angels.
So, the 1954 version, we can see Norman is kind of a little bit more aggressive in the way that he's talking with Esther. It's more of, here, let me tell you what I think you should do. And I love that last line, and I'm right. And a 1950s audience would have just thought this was so romantic, that he cared so much and that he wanted to help her. But looking at it now, I mean, it makes her seem really naive. I mean, she's here saying, I thought I was doing pretty great. And Norman's just kind of showboating, saying, like, come, stick with me, kid. There's lots of these instances throughout this film. There's one point where she gets signed on with the studio, and their makeup artists do her over, and she ends up looking terrible. And she's kind of just sitting there distraught, like, what have they done? Do they think I look so ugly that I need to have all this makeup on? And Norman kind of comes in to save the day, which is interesting. He tells her to clean up her makeup, like take it all off, and then he puts makeup on her, and then she ends up looking stunning. So it's just kind of little subtle messages like that throughout the film, of where he is just saving the day, and it's not really about what Esther is doing. It's more about how Norman is doing these things for her. Now, when we look at the 2018 version, I love that. I mean, that billboard in this version, her name is Allie, played by Lady Gaga. I mean, Allie is just like on this billboard. This is her moment. And I love that Jack, which is the Norman character played by Bradley Cooper, kind of takes her faces, and he's just like in that moment with her, and he's telling her to soak it all in and do her best. Both of those scenes were Norman giving advice, the Norman character giving advice to the Esther character, but you can see the differences in how they're going about doing those things. So more about the 2018 version. In this fourth wave of feminism, we have a film that is much more centered on Allie's success, but not in a way that makes Jack look bad. We get more of a backstory for the Jack Norman character in this one, in the 2018 version. We don't really get any of that in the other versions. So in the 2018 version, we know that he grew up with a dad that was drunk all the time. And he's addicted to alcohol. He also struggles with mental illness, and he's not on good terms with his brother. So he has kind of a right to be upset and angry. Whereas in the 1954 version, there's a scene where Norman gets the door and with the postman there, and the postman says, "Hi, are you Mr. Lester?" which is Esther's last name. And he gets so offended that anyone would think that they thought that her name was their married name. It just made him feel like less of a man, because his wife, when we boil it down, it's because his wife is more successful than he is. So we have a focus on really toxic masculinity in this 1954 version due to the fact that it's in between two different waves of feminism. It's kind of, it's reflecting the culture of the time. When we look at the 2018 version, the reason that, in the end, Jack still does commit suicide, but it's framed in a way that it's because of his mental illness. It's because he can't get rid of his addictions to alcohol. In the end, he just thinks himself that he's not good enough for her. It's less of what society thinks of him, and it's more of what she thinks of him, which is very fourth wave feminist. Fourth wave is just so concerned with equality and banding together. There's a movement called He for She. It's all about men joining with women to have equality for both genders. So those were just a few examples, but I only had a few minutes, and I want to thank you for your time.